They've got a little mirror there on the podium so I can look at myself. Actually, they told me it was to look at the slides behind me, but I'm not going to look at the slides behind me. You can look at them. How's everybody doing on this Christmas Eve? All set for the big day tomorrow? Yeah. All right. Little excitement out there, I hear. That's good. Lots of preparations, right? Trying to get everything ready, prepared, purchased. I'm not sure when it happened for you, but for me, my crisis of faith happened when I was 4. It likely had a lot to do with the fact that my dad was not a big fan of how Christmas was celebrated generally, and he let that be known around the house, and like all small boys do, you kind of pick up that vibe from your dad. So when I ran into Santa at the local department store, I was ready. And I confronted him with what I thought was the big question, which is, if you really are Santa, where did you park your reindeer? I don't really know where that question originated from. I don't even know if I was offered any kind of answer in response to it. My mother likely whisked me away so I wouldn't ruin things for the other kids. Then as our boys were growing up, we had 3 of them. It was our second born who threatened the belief system of our oldest son with his bold proclamations about the existence of the big guy. His mother quickly took him aside and asked him if it was fun to believe, and he sheepishly admitted it was and agreed to keep his skepticism to himself. I hadn't really thought much about it before, but you know, believing is an important component even to the secular version of Christmas. Don't be a Scrooge, people will tell you. Just believe, right? And if you really want to experience the spirit of Christmas, the joy and the magic, well, you have to believe. And if you don't, well, that stocking you grudgingly hung up is going to have a big chunk of coal in it, if you don't believe. And I just saw on television the other night, evidently, at NORAD, there is like 1,500 volunteers who man the phones and track Santa and talk to kids. You know, it's all about sustaining the belief. Now, there are many ways that, our secular version of Christmas reflects the true meaning of Christmas. And for those of us, particularly who are Christians, it's quite conflicted Christmas. For instance, one of those ways in which the secular version of Christmas reflects the true meaning of Christmas is about the importance of light. Here we are at Christmas time, the very darkest time of the year, and what do? We hang our lights on our houses, our trees. We put up elaborate light displays at the zoo, at Confederation Park, out in Airdrie. In fact, everywhere that Christmas is celebrated, everywhere, there are lights. We were in Hawaii a few years ago at Christmas time, and there are lights scattered everywhere. And all of that is because of what John tells us in the first chapter of his account of Jesus' life. He says, the one who is the true light, the one who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Jesus is the light of the world, and John says earlier, the darkness can never extinguish that light. So at Christmas time, all these lights are reminders of the one true light who brings light or hope, which is what light represents, to all mankind. Another example of this reflection is gift giving, right? At Christmas, we give each other gifts. as a reminder that God gave the most precious and valuable gift ever given. He loved the world so much, John tells us, that he gave his only Son in an effort to save us. Sometimes, we give gifts, sometimes because we love people, but sometimes we give it because, it's kind of an obligation, it's reciprocal. Seldom, though, are those gifts really sacrificial. But God's gift was sacrificial right to the core. The problem, though, with the secular version of Christmas, as I'm sure you're all aware, is that it has no real significance. Think about it for a moment. There's really no wow factor. Fantasy, in the end, is just hollow and meaningless. Let me wander back to the whole believing thing for a moment, because I think perhaps this is the most dramatic contrast of all between the real meaning of Christmas and what our world tries to make it to be. Let me share a few more of John's words. From the 10th verse of the first chapter, he says, He, that's Jesus, came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. Now, Peterson, in his version, the Message, says, He was in the world was there because of him, and no one took notice. Now, just for a moment, think about the reality of that. Here was Jesus, the very one who created everything, the universe. And he's in the middle of that creation, and no one has a clue. Now, when he's lying in that manger, I guess we can understand that. Who can really wrap their mind around the idea of a newborn baby being responsible for the universe? But even later on, as an adult, there were plenty of clues. Remember when he stands up in the boat during that storm and the disciples are there and he just speaks? And the wind and the waves die down and stop. They obey. It says his disciples were unnerved. They were terrified. And they said to each other, Who in the world is this guy? But none of them asked, how is it possible that he can actually control the weather with his very voice? And during his ministry, when he took a single fish and 5 small loaves of bread and he fed thousands of people on a hillside picnic, no one suggested that he was actually able to create or multiply molecules. All the people wanted to know was, if we come back tomorrow, would you do it again? And on that afternoon when he called the name of his friend Lazarus and says, come out of the tomb in which he had been buried for 3 days, and that mummified figure tumbles out and then is unwrapped and hysterically hugged and greeted by his friends and sisters. No one started a rumor about how Jesus might very well be the very one who created life in the first place. No, in fact, if you read the text, it says they began to plot how to kill him. Without a doubt, Jesus was never, ever suspected of being the creator of the world. And then John goes on to point out an even more incredible fact. He says that Jesus came to his own people and even they rejected him. Now, John's not talking here about his mom and his dad. He's talking about the Jewish people who rejected him. And what makes this so incredible is that God created the entire Jewish nation for this very purpose, to introduce Jesus to the world. From the time that God called Abraham the father of the Jewish nation and told him, I want to make you the father of a great nation, from that moment there was this promise that through this nation, the entire world was going to be blessed. And then for generation after generation after generation, God planted seeds and he gave promises about this upcoming Messiah until that was all the Jewish nation could think about. When is the Messiah coming? And then he did arrive, didn't he? And not only did they fail to recognize him as the promised Messiah, but they rejected him, John says. Not just with a polite, no thank you. No, they crucified, executed, put to death the one who was the chosen and promised Messiah. From the very beginning, Christmas has been wrapped in unbelief. The creator of the universe, unrecognized in the very world he made, the promised Messiah rejected by the very nation that was created to promote and introduce him. And then John, in verse 12, sticks this little three-letter word, but. It's a great little word, but. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They were reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. Now there's the wow factor. There is nothing, absolutely nothing in this world, nothing in the secular version of Christmas that even comes close to this. The Son of God, the creator of the universe, became the son of human parents so that you and I could be sons and daughters of God. It's incredible to think about. His birth has enabled our rebirth. His becoming mortal makes possible our immortality. But we do have to believe. Christmas really is about believing. Because none of us were present in the stable at his birth, were we? And none of us were roused from our sleep on that hillside by angels singing in the sky. Only the shepherds. And none of us were guided mile after mile by a star to the very place where he slept, like the wise men were. All we have is the convincing testimony of others and the order of this world he created that surrounds us. Compelling, but not incontestable. Kind of reminds me of what Jesus said to his doubting disciple Thomas. Remember? Jesus is showing him his crucifixion wounds. And he says to Thomas, Thomas, you believe because you've seen. But blessed are those who believe and do not see. That's us. You and I. But to all who believe and accept him, to all of us, he gives the right to become his children. And that, my friends, is a whole lot better than anything you'll find in your stocking tomorrow morning.